So, what are we talking about today? I just wanted to get a little video online that covers little tips and tricks that I've learned over the years about being professional that nobody told me. I kind of had to learn this stuff the hard way, and I think that's something that I think the art stuff is covered, like how to draw, how to paint. There's like thousands of videos teaching you how to draw, how to paint, but not a bunch of videos tell you how to like basically function within a studio space, what to expect, little things like that. So these are little tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years, um, and I want to share them with you. So, who am I? My name is Miguel Coronado III. I'm a concept artist and illustrator. I've been working professionally for about 13, 14 years. And 10 of those years I've been working at a game studio in LA. And I live in London now, but I still work with that studio. And all the stuff that I'm about to say are things I've learned from working in the studio and working freelance. So yeah, let's get started. I'm gonna move the chat over so I can see the chat. I'm gonna answer questions after the main talk. I just wanted to say what I had to say first, and then if you have any questions, I will answer any and all questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube later and you have questions, leave a comment below. I will respond. I'm pretty active on YouTube, even though I don't post a bunch of videos. I post mentorship videos, but I'm active, so I will respond to you if you have any questions regarding this video. Okay. Being professional. What I've learned from 10 years in the industry. Okay, these are some tips and tricks, like I said before, that I've learned. A lot of these tips and tricks are really for someone who is just starting out. If you're already working in the industry, much of this stuff will sound just either mundane or redundant, maybe basic, real basic stuff. But they're things that I still encounter from time to time because when I'm not illustrating and doing concept art, I'm art directing. So I'm having to hire illustrators and concept artists to work on projects with me. And I found that I'm working with some people that are very new to the industry, and I have to provide a lot of hand holding, which I don't mind. But ideally, when you're hired on, you don't need a bunch of hand holding and you know what you're doing, which is hard for most people because if you've never been hired before, how are you going to know? So let's get started. So what is being professional? There's two definitions of being professional. One is the basic. It means that you are paid to do something that typically people don't get paid to do. So like singer, everyone sings, but a professional singer is getting paid to do it. Artists, everyone does art. Kids do art, but a professional artist is paid, right? That's not really what this talk is about, because as soon as you're paid to do art, you become a professional. But we're talking more about the adjective version of professional, which is defined as exhibiting courteous, conscientious, and generally business-like manner in the workplace. So I'm talking about just behaving a certain way with people and in the workplace, right? Okay, so let me just scroll down here. I'm just looking at my notes as I do this. Hopefully, if you take anything away from this, it'll develop you into someone that people like working with, and someone, hopefully you become someone who likes working with people because you set up certain boundaries that allow working to be much more enjoyable for you. And I think that's something else that's important to consider. Okay, so first one, the professional infrastructure. This is like the beginner stuff. Like, this is going to be stuff you hear all the time. But you need to identify yourself and have an online presence. Uh, I've had to hire illustrators in the past, and I put out calls for like illustration. And one of the most frustrating things for me as an art director is when somebody says, "Oh, I'd love to work with you," and they send me their portfolio, but they don't have their full legal name anywhere. They just have like a username, and it's hard for me to go back to my client or like my business and say like Rexor 12 wants to work with us. Like, I need to be able to say like there's this person named Tiffany. She's in California. She's one who works with, I need more information. And typically an art director will kind of want to know who you are, not just your username. They might find you through a username, but you should have your legal name somewhere up on either your profile or your website. Not a lot of people have websites anymore, but even like ArtStation is fine. But you just need your name somewhere on there so people understand who you are and where you're located. Because knowing where you're located really informs a team. I'm in London. I work with a company in LA, and we are working with someone in Brazil right now. Being aware of time zones is very important. So if you live in Europe, you should say, "I live in Europe." And that way when someone in the US hires you, that they can understand that there's going to be a little bit of a time zone difference. Yeah, but they could be prepared for that, right? Because that might impact deadlines and check-in points. Okay. Accessible portfolio. You want to maintain a dedicated portfolio site. Like I said, this could be an ArtStation. It could be an online platform. You need to make sure that your email is everywhere. I'm going to show you my website. This is my website homepage. The first thing on the website homepage is my email. It's the very first thing you see. I want you to know how to contact me and that I'm an illustrator and a concept artist. That's the immediate thing that you see, right? And then you can go and find me on socials up here, or you can navigate my portfolio, my blog tutorials. But I want to just kind of reinforce that. My website has my email here on the main page and has my email on the bottom of every page down here. So if someone's trying to hire me, they can find how to contact me very quickly. I try and make it foolproof. I don't want people struggling to contact me. Sometimes people have contact forms on their websites. As an art director, it's one of the most frustrating things is filling out someone's contact form. I really just want to click an email and then email the artist. That's all I want to do. And the quicker I can do that, the happier I am when approaching an artist. So knowing that's how I feel as art director, I keep my website email prominent. You can do the same on ArtStation, or if you're on social media, like on Instagram, put your email somewhere in the, and you can have a link tree, or you can have it just on your main, like contact me here for work inquiries. Make it like idiot proof. Okay. Social media visibility and boundaries, right? Use social media for visibility, but you gotta treat it professionally. If you're gonna be posting your work on social media, it's better to have a dedicated art page that's not gonna be like you posting up like your dinner and like hanging out with your friends. It's easier to have just a dedicated art page, and then you can have your personal account, which most artists do at this point. I feel like it's redundant to say, but it's just much easier to have just a page of art that people are looking at. And if you're going to be on social media as your main point of contact, you need to check your DMs, because I've been trying to contact several artists for a while now, personally, for a project, and they don't check their DMs. They don't check their messages at all. And I would like to work with them, but they're not checking. So I don't know what to do. Like that. I'll try and email them if I can find their email, but some of these guys don't have their email on socials. So email visibility, check your DMs if you're online, if you're on Instagram, I know a lot of the animation industry artists are often hired from social media profiles. All the art directors I've met that work in animation, they have all said, we found our team through social media. So it is important to be on it. If you think it's a distraction, there's apps you can get that limit your screen time on social media, and there's apps that you can get that will post for you, so you don't actually have to go on the website to post. You can just let it post for you. But you do need to check your DMs, because if someone likes your work, you got to get, make the connection. Payment readiness. You're a beginner. You just got hired. You want the client to pay you as easily and quickly as possible. So you basically need to be prepared to work with the client. So like if the client's like, I use Zelle to pay, and you're like, I don't know what Zelle is, download Zelle, get on Zelle, get paid through Zelle. In Europe, a lot of people use like direct bank transfers, so it's a little different here. You just send your bank info, and people just send money directly into your bank account. I know in the U.S., like Venmo's big, PayPal's big, so it doesn't really matter what. You just got to be prepared to jump to any platform that you need to. You don't want to make the client jump to a platform. You want to make the client just click a button to pay you. Make it that fast, that easy. Something to consider. Okay. You want to lower the friction. That's basically what you want to do. Any kind of friction to getting paid needs to go away. Okay, here's a big one for beginners. It's a tough one. We can have a whole talk on this, but I'm just gonna say it now, and we're gonna jump past it. You gotta know your rate. You have to know your minimum rate at least. So, let's say you're a professional concept artist, and someone's trying to hire you for like a video game thing. Like maybe you tell yourself, I don't work for less than $2,500. That could be a lot of money for a beginner, but for like a video game company that's paying a concept artist, that might not be a lot of money really. Like video game companies do have a lot of money to spend. So you need to know your minimum, right? So like what's the least you're going to get paid to make you happy and make you, like profitable. You can't just survive. You don't want to just be surviving. I don't have a specific number to tell you. There are different techniques you can use to find those numbers. I'll tell you those in a minute. But minimum rate, minimum day rate, lots of the time, if you're in concept art, they want to know how much you are per day, because sometimes they bring you on for like a week. They want to know how much you're going to spend on you. Numbers I have heard in the past, $500 a day for like a professional concept artist living in LA. So that's like an expensive city. $500 a day is what I heard back when I lived in LA. So that might give you a starting point. Now that might be high for, if you're a beginner, that might be a little high for someone to be like paying you $500 a day. You might start at like $350 a day, $400 a day, and you work your way up to $500. But there is no ceiling. So don't think that working for $500 a day is the limit. You can always work for more money. It just, you got to work your way into it, right? You got to prove yourself a little bit. So you got to know how much you're going to charge for things. You got to get an idea of like, what are you going to do if someone asks you to do a cover of a book? What are you going to do if someone asks you to do a trading card game illustration? If someone hires you to do an interior illustration of an RPG book, what are you charging? What are you expecting? So anyway, it's the minimum amount plus extra. So it's like, what's your minimum? I'm not saying minimum amount. It's your minimum. So like, what's the lowest you will go? And typically you want a little extra on top of that. You don't actually want it to be as low as you go. You want a little profit. So that's kind of a way to calculate it. You can search online for common rates in a given industry. You could do a Google search and be like, what does it cost for this? And typically a search engine will find some kind of blog or website that tells you some rates. Guilds have books that track rates. You can go check out a guild book and see how much rates are for like the illustration guild. You can ask other artists for help and advice. So if you're watching this video now because you're on Discord, You're free to message me on Discord, Mike086, ask me for advice on rates, or like budgeting question. Not budgeting. Budgeting is what companies do. Artists have rates. Companies budget for artist rates. So your rate is what you want to just figure out. You're welcome to ask me on Discord, right? So asking other artists for help and advice is great. If you really want to, I'm against generative AI and using it to create art and like music and shit like that. But you could ask an AI to just tell you what are the minimum rates for a mid-tier company in the board gaming industry, and it'll search the database of the internet and find you minimum rates for like board game. I keep saying minimum. I mean like standard rates. I'm using the wrong word. Standard rates for like a board game mid-tier company in the industry, right? And it'll give you a little range of stuff there. So if there's one thing you're going to use AI for, it's kind of like an improved search. And if you're confused, if you're wondering if it's being honest with you, you can ask it for the sources and say like, where did you get this information? And then you can go check yourself the links. So just for transparency, this was the breakdown when I asked Google Gemini what are the standard rates for a trading card game in the games industry. It gave me these rates. Magic the Gathering standard 1,000 to 1,500. Magic the Gathering license 1,500 to 2,000. Lorcana pays 800 to 1,200. Pokemon 1,500 to 2,500. Indie. So you gotta double check this shit. You can't just go trusting it. You gotta do a cross check. But it gives you a loose idea of maybe what you should be charging, right? Okay. If there's anything... Oh, sorry, I'm skipping across. Remember that the drawing and the painting is part of the job, but you also got to like consider the time it takes to write emails, the time it takes to organize projects, to do the research, to do meetings. You need to remember like some companies are going to want to have meetings with you constantly. You need to account for all that in your rate. Like if they're going to be having a meeting with you every day for like an hour, you want to probably charge a little more because it's like they're eating up your time, right? So that's something to consider. And alternatively, you can charge an hourly rate for meetings. You could say like, here's my standard rate for project fees. I charge for consultation. And that's what you call it, consultation fee. And, that's to consult about the project, right? And that's basically, they're just paying you to talk to you. Like lawyers do this. Other professionals in different industries do this. A consultation fee is a common thing to be asking for. Because you're basically giving away free information. Unless you get paid for it, right? So you can charge for that stuff. Okay, so use contracts, right? Contracts is another tricky thing. There's a sample contract here on this Miro board. This is based off one that I used that I kind of just made myself. It works pretty well. You basically want something in writing. It could even be an email that says, I am doing this for this much money, and then somebody else saying like, I will pay you for this thing for this much money. That's all it needs to be. But it needs to be in writing. You don't really want to just use an email. You really do want a contract, but some jobs are really small and the client might get scared away if you ask for a contract. So in that case, you could ask for half up front and just, if it's a really small contract, just do half up front and just get paid the other half later. In that case, you basically, the first half you get paid is the kill fee, which means if they cancel the project, they don't get that money back. That's kind of how you do it for a smaller project. That's how I do it. Let me rephrase that. This is how I do things. So some of the stuff might not be true for other artists. Some of the stuff might not be true for you or your situation. But for me, anything over $1,000 and over, I have to have a contract. I don't work for that much money without a contract. Anything under, I might do a 50-50 split thing, like I said, where I'll be like, okay, they're only going to pay $800. Well, pay me half up front. That's $400, right? And then if the project gets canceled, I keep $400, and that's it. It's non-refundable. So you need to explain that. You got to explain, this is my starting fee. It's non-refundable. If you don't want a contract, this is how we're going to do things, right? But if it's a certain threshold, I always do contract, right? Okay. Oops. Also remember that if there's anything that you're making that's being used for a product or in a product or as a product, if there's anything you're designing or making that's in a product or as a product of someone else, you should have a contract. Just you need to work that stuff out in paper before you start anything, because then people will get into arguments later, and if you have the contract that outlines everything, it'll work out better for you. This contract here, it's an independent contractor service agreement. It's got info here. It's got a timeline, explains the timeline, explains costs, the deliverables. A lot of people that start off in the illustration and concept art world don't know that word. Like, I never used the word deliverables until I started working in the video game industry. The deliverable is the thing you are delivering specifically. So, like, I am doing concept art, but what is the actual thing I'm giving the company? Well, PSD files, high-res PSD files probably. Maybe you're doing a splash art image. It's high-res, print-ready. Maybe not print-ready, but screen-ready splash art. Maybe it's print-ready, CMYK PSD for a book cover. So there's different definitions to each deliverable depending on what you're working on. You're going to have a revision clause in your contract. You want to tell people how many revisions you're willing to do for the rate you've quoted. So when you do quote your rate, you also need to think about how much do I need to get paid to start a project, possibly do like 3 changes, and then still be happy with that number. And normally you can figure out a rate that works out. Like, you might be like, I'll do for like $1,200. I'll do, start the project and you get 3 revisions. And then, like, it starts off major. Oops, I flicked you off. Starts off major, and it goes into kind of like intermediate, then it goes to minor revisions, right? So, and you can define that in the contract. You can say a major revision is a compositional change. Intermediate revision is like a limb adjustment. A minor revision is a color adjustment, right? So that you define all that in the contract. And then again, the deliverables. What are they? It's high-resolution images in a PSD format, 12 of them. Layered, define everything. Payment schedule should be in the contract. Deposit starting fee. I think it's good to start with is either called a commencement fee or a starting fee. It's very common. It's not unexpected, and if someone's serious about working with you, they'll pay you a starting fee because they want the project to get started. And that can be as much as 50% up front, or as little as 20% down, basically. Milestone. I didn't know about the word milestone until I started working in the video game industry. Milestone is the check-in point. So if it's a really big project, you'll have multiple milestones. So it's not just a deadline. It's a project start, milestone check-in, deadline. And the milestones can be like 1 milestone, or it can be like 12 milestones. 12 milestones kind of implies that you're working for a full year, because typically a milestone is like 1 month of work. In the video game industry, is 1 month of work. So if I'm saying I'm going to work for 12 milestones, that's 12 months of work. It's basically you're employed for the full year. That's only for big projects. But as a professional freelancer, you can start using some of this terminology that'll make you sound like you know what you're doing. So you can say, hey, we start the book cover with sketch phase. We call that milestone 1, and then we do color rough, milestone 2, and then final render, milestone 3, and then so you break it up into 3 milestones for your delivery. And you could say at each of these milestones, I get paid. So I get paid, 30% now, 30% then, 30% at the end, and then the last 10% is like to top it off. You can break it up however you want, but some of the terminology I'm giving you these are things that I didn't know about until I started working in the video game industry. So milestone is number 1 word, and deliverable is the number 2 word. You're going to want a late fee in your contract. If someone's going to pay you late, they need to pay you more. It needs to be stated in the contract, clear, bold. And then normally people don't need to pay you for about 30 days because they might not have the budget that month to pay you, so it gives them 30 days to get money and pay you, right? So typically 30 days is accepted for most industries. So if you do work for someone and they're not paying you right away, that's normal. Most companies won't pay you exactly when you're done. Most of the ones I've worked with, they don't do their booking until the end of the month. So you don't get paid until the month's over. It's just a standard thing that happens. You got to be prepared for that, because some people, you start working in the industry and you're desperate for money and you're in a bad way. Maybe you quit your day job expecting to get paid immediately. You're not. You're going to get maybe a 30-day window where you're not going to get any money. So you got to be prepared for that. That's all for like bigger contracts typically. If you're getting paid for like commissions and stuff, it's normally immediate. If you're doing like someone's D&D character for like $50, you're probably gonna get paid. If it's that case, I would just get paid $50 up front and then do the work. But you still want a contract for little things like that. The client might want a contract in that case because you might screw them over by not doing the drawing. There's reproduction of work. This is important. You should explain how people can use your art that you made. Usage of work, protection of rights, marketing. Marketing means for you. So like you should always state in a contract, I get to use this to promote me. Even if they want to own the work later, you should still get the availability to promote yourself with the work in your portfolio, basically. You're saying, can I use it on my portfolio? If a company says, no, you cannot use it in your portfolio, that's your cue to charge way more money, right? Because you're not going to be able to prove that you worked on the project ever, basically. And lots of times in like VFX houses, this is like a common practice where like the artists that work on some of that stuff, they don't get to put that stuff in their portfolio. You just worked on it and you just say, I worked on that, and then you're in the credits typically. Or your VFX house is in the credits, and then you happen to be like, maybe you're in there. It depends on the contract you're in. Rejection cancellation fee. Gotta get a kill fee in your contract. If the client cancels the project like halfway through, you need to get paid at least half the money, right? Because that's only fair. So you got to state that in the contract. You can also make it kind of like a disincentive. Like you could say, kind of like what I said, if you get paid 50% up front, you just tell them this is non-refundable. And that way they understand that they need to like see this project through with you, or they just lost that like, $200 or whatever. That's more for smaller clients. For bigger clients, kill fee is normally standard. But if it's your own contract, you want to make sure you have it in there. Finally, the revision number. You got to say how many you want to do. Like, I only do 3 revisions. Then you got to pay me more. You state that in the contract, right? The one thing that's not in this contract because this shows you how old the contract is, there's not an AI clause in this contract. You really want an AI clause. You want a clause that says you cannot use this artwork to train AI. That would be good to have. Alternatively, if you're an art director, you want the clause to say artists cannot use AI. If you want the art to actually be drawn and painted, like as an art director, I would put down you can't use AI in the contract. If we find out you use AI, we don't pay you. So that's how I would kind of word it. So that's something that is the big missing part of this contract. And again, that's only because this contract's an old contract that I've had since before AI was a thing. Okay, so let's move on. Larger jobs, medium to large jobs, you can normally negotiate a price. It's not just a flat fee. Like when you start stating your rate, if they're a serious company, if they've worked with other people in the past, they'll come back to you and negotiate a little bit, and you got to be prepared for that. Oh shit, I'm a moth. You got to be prepared to negotiate a little bit. If you say your rate and the person just ghosts you, then they're probably not worth working with. Typically, you want to be able to state your rate, have them say, actually, I was thinking this. Then you can maybe compromise to something that's makes both you happy. The big advice I got from my father-in-law, who has a master's in business, is you state your number first. If someone's like, how much do you charge for a book cover, you can just say like, say more than your ideal number. So like if you want to get paid $2,000 for a book cover, say 3,000, and then they go, oh, well, I was thinking more like 1,500. Then you can say, how's 2,000 sound? And then they go, oh, that sounds okay. And then you go, okay, great. So you got paid 2,000 what you wanted, and they feel like they got a deal. And you threw out that higher number just to kind of like throw off the whole. You basically tip the scale by saying the number first. If they say their number first, then you kind of are in their ballpark now. If you're like, what's your budget? And they go, we only got $50. Well, then you're like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to work together, you know? But if you state your number first, you're kind of explaining to them, I only work in this zone. And this zone is like the $3,000 zone. And if you want to work with me, you're going to be in this area. And then, like, typically, if they're serious, they'll either negotiate with you or they will try and find more money to pay you at your rate, which will happen too. For bigger companies, they'll just get more budget. A big company can just go to their financial department and say, we want to increase the budget on this project because the artist we want to hire is really excellent, and they're gonna make this project soar and stuff, and they'll have their ways to get you the money. But it is negotiation, so just remember that. If the negotiation doesn't happen, you probably don't want to work with that person because they're probably too cheap anyway. And it's hard because once you get in talks with like money and negotiating, you get excited and you want to do the job, but you got to just understand that it's better to dodge a bullet sometimes. Okay, so now the next part of the talk. So you're good now. You've been working for years. You've been honing your craft. You practice every day. You've lost sleep. You've sought out critiques. You're finally good. And you submit your portfolio and you get your first gig. Maybe it's a small indie board game. Maybe it's someone you found online that works at a studio and you got a job. You went through numerous interviews. Who knows? You got the job now. You're good. Now you got to be professional. If you're like me and like most artists online, you probably just stay at home and work and draw all day and you become very introverted and socially awkward because that's all you do, right? You got to like train yourself out of that once you get the job, right? So let's jump into some of this stuff. So you got to like lead the conversation and then maintain idiot-proof clarity. This is all about talking to a client, right? Idiot-proof clarity. Set the stage, okay? When you start talking to your client or your company, whichever they are, ask them, how do y'all communicate? What's your preferred communication method? And then you need to try and work with their system. If it's a big company, they're going to tell you what they use, and you're going to have to use what they use. Like my company, we use Slack, and we use Miro. This board I'm showing you is a Miro board. I only started using this board because I learned about it through work, and it's amazing. It's a free whiteboard app online. Anyway, it's really great for references and showing clients stuff. So like showcasing your work. Okay. For smaller clients, the infrastructure is not going to be there. Most clients are going to want to talk to you through social media, messaging, and maybe Discord, maybe email. If you're working a lot with a bunch of people, you might not want to work in email. I personally hate working through email. So for smaller clients, you can tell them how it's going to go. And that'll also kind of set you up as like more professional. If you come to the table for like a small RPG book company and they want you to do a cover, you can say, hey guys, I can't wait to do the cover for you. I use Miro as my whiteboard, so all my updates are going to be through Miro links. All you need to do is click the link, and it'll take you to the board, and you can leave comments and stickers on things you like, and I will read that board, and we will post up images and to continue the progress all through the board. You even show them the board in like a call, and we call it onboarding. This is a term we use in the video game industry. When you onboard somebody is when you get them on the team functioning within the team system. So if you're a small freelancer and you're working with small clients, you can onboard them into how you work. and a lot of small clients have never worked with someone professionally, they'll feel more taken care of because you are setting the ground rules for how this is going to go. Um, it's kind of like when you hire a contractor at your house. I know most of y'all don't own a house, but if you hire someone to like redo the plumbing, they're probably going to tell you, "I'll be in on Monday. We're going to set up tarp. We're going to take the pipes out. We're going to do this." Like they'll kind of walk you through what they're about to do before they do it. And it's the same thing for you as a freelance illustrator or a concept artist. You kind of want to walk the client through what's going to happen, especially if they're not used to hiring someone before. You need to kind of educate them as to how it's going to go. And that'll also clear up the headache for you later. So you can onboard the small client. If they're a big client, they're going to onboard you, right? That's the difference. Big client, you go to their system. Small client, you can put them onto your system. My system right now is a combination of the system I use at work with my freelance clients, because I like the system we use at work a lot. It's very efficient. Okay, meetings. Your client's going to want to meet you. They're going to want to talk to you about the project. Most smaller clients I found, most mid-tier clients, they're excited about their project. They really want to talk about it, and they will talk about it forever. So what you need to do is set some boundaries with meetings. Also, maybe your client's a good friend of yours. Maybe it's like your cousin's hiring you to do an illustrated poster for their band. Okay, when we have a meeting, are we just going to be shooting the shit about life, or are we talking about work? You got to set the boundaries, right? So when you do a meeting, and I didn't do any of this stuff until I started working at the video game company I work at. When you do a meeting, set the agenda points. Tell the client, I'd like to meet on Friday at this time. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about deadline, style, and printing or something, whatever the job is, right? And so then those are the main points you got to talk about. When you do the meeting, you need to stay on the topic. You need to stay on the points. You got to basically be like, okay, so guys, we're going to meet. We're going to talk about, first thing we're going to talk about is style. Let's talk about the style of the game and whatever. So we start talking about the style. As soon as the style points have been hit, you got to follow up with, is there anything else on this point? Are we good to move on? Okay, then you move on to the next point. Once you moved on to the next point, you don't talk about the first point anymore. If someone comes in late to the meeting and they're like, oh, I missed a thing about they're late to the meeting and you need to just reschedule a new meeting later. Typically, in a video game world, you're going to be the one invited to meetings. Like your art director is going to put you in a meeting and you're going to have to talk to them about the project, right? That's typically how it works. You and your art director talk about stuff. When it's a freelance client, they might be like I work with lots of indie publishers. They're very excited about the project and they want to talk about it nonstop. So I have to tell them, we're talking about this, this, and this. Is there anything you want to talk about? And they tell me what they want to talk about. And I go, okay, we're talking about this, 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 and this. And then the meeting, and I'll tell them, I only have 30 minutes to talk. So that kind of sets the other boundary of like, I have limited time. We only have 30 minutes to talk. We got to get through 5 points in 30 minutes. Let's do this. And you get into the meeting. Here's some little quality of life tips for when you're in meetings online with people. And this is something we do at work all the time. When you're not talking, mute yourself. Mute yourself when you're not talking. Just keep yourself shut off. That way, if you sneeze, if your dog starts barking, if a truck drives by, if a plane crashes, everything is muted so that you're not disrupting the meeting. Okay? If you're not actively talking, mute yourself. Turn off your camera if you need to step away or do something visually distracting. So I might be on my phone talking to you in a meeting. Like I was just on my phone talking to my boss at an end-of-day meeting. If I'm like on my phone looking at him and I'm just sitting there talking, that's like a normal meeting. But if I'm in a big group meeting on my phone and I start like cooking dinner, everyone's going to be like, are you cooking dinner right now? Like, what are you doing? Or like if I have to like, if a delivery guy comes and I have my headphones in and I need to answer the door, all you need to do is just mute your screen so people just see the black screen and they're not going to worry about what you're doing. It's not going to be a distraction. So mute yourself when you're not talking. Mute your camera whenever you got to do something visually distracting. Okay. Always mute yourself if you can. Always mute yourself when you're coughing, sneezing, or burping. Don't be burping on a meeting with a client. Don't be sneezing unless you couldn't catch it. Try and mute yourself. Okay. And if you can't, say excuse me after you're doing it, you gotta it sounds really rudimentary and it sounds like a real basic thing that I'm talking to you about. But I've been on meetings where people are just gross, and frankly, it's unprofessional. It's unprofessional for someone to just belch in the middle of a meeting unmuted. It's gross. It's distracting. You got to mute yourself. Okay. If you need to turn off the camera because you're sneezing or coughing a lot, turn off the camera. That's just some things you got to think about. You don't want people at the workplace thinking, "Oh, look, he's really gross. He's always blowing his nose on camera, and he's picking his ear and stuff. All that stuff that you do casually when you're not thinking. You got to stop that." Okay, enough on that. But it is something I've noticed as an art director. I talk to certain people, you see certain things happen. Okay. Try not to draw during a meeting. This is a big one. I still draw a lot when I'm on meeting. Let me rephrase that. I don't draw anymore when I'm meetings. When I'm on meetings, I'm taking notes constantly. You should be taking notes, especially if you're working with a big company. If you're working with a video game company, you got hired to a studio and you're expected to be in meetings, unless they're actively brainstorming and they want you to doodle to get ideas out, you need to just be taking notes the whole time. Because what's going to happen if you don't is your boss will stop the meeting in front of everyone and say, "Are you getting this?" Because people want to know you're listening. They're being listened to. And I used to draw a lot in meetings at work, and you just need to grow out of it. You're going to be drawing all day long. You don't need to be drawing that one 30-minute meeting. If the meeting's going on more than 30 minutes, that's a whole nother problem. If you're getting bored, that's different. Okay. When you're meeting with a client, take notes. Again, we grew up drawing during classes, during lectures. I drew during class all the time. But when you're talking to a client, when you're talking to your work coworkers, you got to be taking notes in the meeting. As an art director, when I'm talking to someone who I'm giving information to and they're not writing down things, it gets me worried. And it makes me think they're not listening to me, and they're going to ask me a bunch of stupid questions later that I already answered because they weren't taking notes. And so I've been on both sides of the table. I want people to be actively taking notes when I talk to them. Otherwise, I feel like I'm wasting my time. That's how it feels when you're on the other side. Okay, when you're taking notes, jot down any questions that come up during the meeting, during the listening portion. So as we're talking now, I see people are in chat. I'm not acknowledging chat because I want to get through all this first, and then I'm going to scroll back and answer questions. Same with the meeting. Write your questions down. Someone should ask, "Does anyone have any questions?" At that time, you raise your hand, ask questions. Alternatively, if you're giving a talk or a meeting to a client and you're the one kind of in charge of the thing, you got to explain to the client, this is how I work. I know I do thumbnails, I do sketches, I do color comps, I do this. At the end, you say, "Do you have any questions about that?" You got to give time for questions. Okay, let's see. Normally, the client will ask you if you have any questions. At that time, you ask questions. Make sure you're on the same page, right? If there's anything that's confusing you at all in a meeting, ask the question. The last thing you want to do with a client or with the boss at work is be confused, and you don't want to look foolish, so you don't ask the question, and then later on you just don't know what to do, and then you just mess up, and then everyone's like, why'd you not do the thing we asked you to do? I wasn't clear about it. Then why didn't you ask it during the meeting? That's what's going to happen. It's all going to be on you for not asking. So you got to ask the questions. Be on the same page. Okay, when a meeting is about to wrap up, run through your notes, and the most important thing you can do to show you're listening is to list off action items. If you and I are meeting and I'm saying all right, so Gross Girl, she's going to be getting references over to Tony by end of day today, and Tony is going to start sketches and get those to Miguel by next Friday. And at the end of the meeting, like Gross Girl would say, action items are, I'm going to get you references by end of day today. Tony's going to get you drawings. This, like, someone will read off the action items so everyone understands. After the meeting has been done, these are the things we have to do now. Because otherwise, if there's nothing you got to do after the meeting, you probably didn't need to have the meeting. So that's kind of a good way to judge. If you come out of a meeting with like nothing to do, like you must have been like learning something really special, because otherwise it's kind of like, why am I in this meeting? So just something to keep an eye out for. A lot of this stuff is more to do with when you're working with a small client. If you're working with a small client and you underquoted yourself, you're going to get really pissed off when they take up an hour of your time going over their love of Spider-Man, right? Like that's why I'm trying to like say all these tools are for you to stop wasting your time with people as much as they are for you to not waste their time. Okay. Make sure that, okay, reading the action items also, like if they're a new client and they hired you, running a meeting with agenda points and action items listed off at the end of the meeting, and like also another big thing to do to really impress a client is you email them the notes you took. That's like super professional. If you like say, I'm going to follow up this meeting with the notes that we just talked about so you can have the copy for yourself. That's like top level game. Most people just don't do that kind of shit. And in the video game industry, at least where I work at, we do that kind of stuff. I always send my producer my notes just so he sees what I typed up, what I was listening to. And if he sees something I missed, he could say, oh, you forgot this. But that's his opportunity to course correct me. Okay, time management for meetings. Respect the clock. If the meeting should last 30 minutes, anything longer needs to be rescheduled. So if the meeting was 30 minutes and you get to 31 minutes, you need to ask yourself, can we talk about this in another meeting later? And, end the meeting now. Normally you can do that. Only certain occasions does the meeting need to go long. For most video game company meetings, the time is limited. So most of the time you only have 30 minutes to talk. And if you don't get everything out in that 30 minutes, you're shit out of luck, basically. Okay? Let's see. I think that's the last thing on meetings. You just want to show that you value people's time. And if you're working with a small client, you want to basically limit the time they're taking up from you, right? Frictionless delivery. Don't make clients sign into portals or jump through hoops to see your work, okay? Unless there's like an NDA thing where like you can't show your work completely publicly. Like some artists you'll notice have a password in their website because they can't show their work like publicly, but they can still show it to potential hiring people. So they'll have a password protected portfolio. I have a special password protected portfolio. It's not even linked to my website. You can't even see it. So I have to specifically send you the link and give you the password for you to see it. But anyway, if you're trying to deliver stuff to a client, though, you don't want to put it in some website you got to sign into. You got to the Miro, when I link on Miro, I link a shareable link, and you can click the settings so people can just click on it and view. That's why I like Miro. I normally do that for bigger projects. If it's a smaller client, I might just use Discord. Okay. Take time to make things presentable when you're delivering stuff. You gotta look at typos. Consider your language. Using caps lock. Little things like that. When you have a bunch of typos, or I don't know, maybe using crass language, maybe you're swearing a lot, or maybe your caps lock is on, those are all signs to somebody that you're not taking time communicating. You're not considering what you're saying. You're not taking the time to make sure it was correct. If your caps lock's stuck on, you're not even taking the time to turn off the caps lock. So what you don't even want to take time to format the text for me? Like, what are we doing here? Those are all things you need to consider when you're talking to your client, especially at work. People are going to call it out at work. They'll be like, why do you always have caps lock on? Or something like that, Clear referencing. This is like my biggest pet peeve. If you send work, I'm going to go some options I did for a fantasy film. This is going to sound really basic, but if you send work to people, you got a number or letter the work. You want people to say, I like number 4. Number 4 is my favorite. Or like, oh, I like number E. E is my favorite. You want them to see it, know what to call it, talk to you about it real quick. Frictionless delivery. Clear references. If your handwriting sucks, use the type tool. Don't do this if you have garbage handwriting. Like, some of this handwriting is pretty messy on mine too. You can kind of read this as flowers or soft fabric, but for work, at my day job, I normally type everything out. I don't just handwrite things. Some people like to handwrite things, but a lot of time your handwriting sucks and you need to just type it out. So that's just my note to you. As an art director, I hate it when people send me just images. They're just like, here's some images. And I'm like, how the fuck am I supposed to talk to you about what this is? Like, how do you know which one I'm talking about? I don't want to have to like describe the image to you. I like the one with the armor and the dress. If they're all armor and dress, then what are you talking about? So reference your images. Put the numbers on there. AI is a tool, not a crutch. If you're using AI, like at work, when I take notes, I run it through an AI to clean up my notes, because I just type out my notes stream of consciousness. So like as I'm listening in the meeting, I just type down every single thing somebody says, and then I'll run it through like an AI and just say like, clean this up for me, and it'll clean it up for me. But you got to read it, you got to cross-check it, and you got to make sure you didn't fuck it up, right? So that's the downside, is the AI is unreliable. So if you're going to use it, you got to be super careful and make sure it's not hallucinating. I don't use it for Gen AI. I have, full disclosure, I've had to use Gen AI at work. I was tasked to stress test different models for potential use at work. I try not to use it most of the time. There's been a few cases where I've had to. The majority of the time at work, I never use it. It's only been like 2 times I've had to use it in the past. You shouldn't use generated AI. I think it just sucks. But if you're going to use it to clean up your notes, it's a tool. Okay? You don't want to be like so incompetent at taking notes that you only can use AI. That's the one thing you don't want to do. You don't want to get too used to it. Okay. This talk that I'm talking to you right now, this little document that I'm scrolling through, I used AI to clean up the formatting so that the talking points are very clear. So if you're wondering, like, how do I use it? I use it for, like, the talk, for the text, because, I'm not a writer. Okay. Strategic onboarding and research. Okay, you got to position yourself as the expert. So when you're working, this has to do with when you're working with, like, a new client. Like, when I say a new client, I mean, like, when you're working with an inexperienced person that has never hired an artist before, you need to onboard them onto how things are going to work. Okay, so you need to tell them, and I have this little inverted pyramid here because this is how I do things, right? Like, we're going to start working on this thing, and we're going to first start with references and research, and then I'm going to do a set of thumbnails for you, and then I'm going to do a set of sketches, and then we're going to do the final renders. And at each point in this little pyramid, we're going to have a check-in, and once we do the check-in point, ideally, we're not going to go backwards. We're just going to keep moving forward. Okay? You explain to the client how things are going to go, right? That way they understand the pipeline. Once they understand the pipeline, they'll understand things like, once I approve a thumbnail, I cannot go backwards. I have to go forward. I can't. So maybe I like 2 thumbnails. Maybe they like 2. That's okay. You just got to keep them moving forward in the pipeline. That's like a big thing. If you're working for a big company, if you're working for a video game company, they're going to tell you their pipeline. And they're going to say, welcome to Blizzard. at Blizzard, we do this, and then they'll tell you what you're going to do. It's very different. But when you're working with a client for the first time, you oftentimes need to tell them how it's going to work because they don't know. They just don't know, and it's not their fault because they've never hired someone before. And if they're a new client that's hiring someone for the first time, you want to give them the best experience possible because it's going to encourage them to go out and do this again later and maybe hire another artist in the future. In this time with AI taking over shit, you want to encourage people hiring other people. So you want to make the working with a person enjoyable for them. So they can see, oh, it's so much better to work with a person. I'm not going to use AI. Right? That's what you want to do. Okay. You got to start viewing yourself as a company. Not only do you provide deliverables, there's an expectation of customer service. You got to be enjoying the work. I always compare this to like an Apple store. If you ever go to an Apple store, everyone there is like drinking the Kool-Aid and they fucking love working at Apple. And they're like, oh, welcome. Let's talk to you about iPhone. You kind of got to do that for your clients. You want this down? My dog's scratching the blanket. You kind of got to do that with your clients. You got to like make it so fun and exciting to work with you that they're just like, oh my God, it was so great working with Kyle. Like, he was so enjoyable to work with. He was so nice. And like, he was so like, he really loved this project, took care of it. Even if you think the project fucking sucks, you got to like turn on your professionalism and make sure like, no, I love this project. I want to do more of this project. And like, sometimes you're going to be on a project you're not excited about, but you're going to get money. So you get excited about the money. It's just how it works sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Okay. First inquiry. Inquiry first, sorry. Always ask questions before making assumptions. That's a big thing. Never assume something of the client. Never assume something of the art director. Ask the question. Like, don't be like, oh, I thought you wanted this. Like, you don't know what they want. You gotta ask the question. Make sure you're on the same page, okay? Okay, creative compass, analyze the shape language and mood early. Okay, this is a little more artsy stuff. Analyze the shape language and mood early. Determine if the project requires your unique personal style or if you need to stick to a house style. It's normally pretty easy to figure out, right? Most large IPs have a house style that you need to kind of hit, right? Like Blizzard, Riot, those big companies, they expect you to draw like them. Like, you should look like what we do. Smaller companies might be hiring you because they like your style so much that they want the game to look like your stuff. So you just need to figure out what side are we on here. Am I defining the look of this game, or am I like artist number 5 that needs to produce work that kind of looks like the style? More and more as AI continues to grow, I feel like artists are going to be hired for their unique style more often, because replicating an established style is going to be much easier to do with AI systems. But there'll always be unique styles to certain artists and unique decisions that artists will make that'll make companies go, we need to hire that person because only they could do this. That's just how it'll work. You just got to find out what side you're on. Okay, the funnel approach, that's what I mentioned here. This is the funnel approach. If you don't know, if you're very new to concept art and illustration, you should work in a funnel. Research and ref. Do the most widespread exploration during research and ref. Sometimes the client will give you ref. In the case of this project here, my client gave me all this ref. All the references you see here are from my client. And what I did is I took... he gave me notes. My client gave me notes. My client linked me lore. They knew what they wanted pretty clearly. Like, I think this is a very good mood board from a client. Like, they have a very like artistic eye. They knew kind of what they wanted for everything. They have like this whole concept for the magic they wanted to use. So whether it's the client giving you the ref or you finding the ref yourself, that part's the widest part of exploration, right? You kind of like, sky's the limit at first. And then once you and your client sync on the ref and you're on the same page, then you do your thumbnails. Once your client picks out their favorite thumbnails, then you do your sketches. Once your client picks out the favorite sketch, then you do the final render. But you don't move. In my opinion and my track record is you don't move forward until you get approval. If you move forward without approval, you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot when they ask for changes later. So always check in. If you're in doubt, check in. If you're like, I don't know if they like this, check in. Be like, hey, y'all cool with me finishing this? And the moment they say, yes, I'm cool with you finishing this, if they have it in writing, then that's your chance to be able, like if they come back later and go, actually, we wanted option C, you could go back to the email and say, well, on Tuesday you said you wanted option E, and we went forward with option E because based on our conversation on Tuesday, that's what that's what the emails say, or that's what our Slack messages say, whatever. You kind of want some little that kind of stuff, that little like backing up your decision making. That kind of stuff happens more with like big companies when you have a bunch of people asking for different things. You kind of want to put them in check, because sometimes a company will come back and be like, actually we wanted a different spaceship entirely, and the team's already working on spaceship number 3. So you need to come back and say, like, guys, based on our conversations, we started spaceship 3, and that's how it's going to go, unless you want us to change everything, which in case that this is a big term I'm going to say right now that will save you a bunch of headache. If client has a bunch of changes and you feel you're getting taken advantage of and you're not getting paid enough, the first thing you got to say is, I think we're outside of scope. I think we have, breached the scope. You can say, like, that's a little outside of scope. So if a client says, I want you to do a cover, you start doing the cover, and they're like, actually, I want you to do this other characters too while you're at it. You can say, actually, that's kind of out of scope of the project, because this project's really just me doing the cover. If you want me to do a bunch of characters, I can do that, but we're going to have to negotiate a new contract for those characters. So, like, saying something's out of scope is your way of saying, like, I didn't agree to that. Instead of just saying, hey, I didn't agree to that, because that sounds kind of aggressive, just say, I think we're kind of reaching outside of scope right now. And then that's a way to kind of bring the conversation back to, like, what are we actually doing here? Like I said, when you're working with a client, you're trying to make their life enjoyable and fun, right? And you don't want to be aggressive or be temperamental. You want to be like a really agreeable person that has boundaries, right? So like the boundaries would be like, you consider scope, you consider meeting times, all these things. Okay, we're almost at the end here. The iterative workflow, executing through a professional constant pipeline. Reference fidelity. If you're providing references, always provide references, is what I'm trying to say. Always provide references. They're the client's visual vocabulary. You may have come up with your own references, but try not to deviate from your clients. So in the case of this project here, there are certain things that my client wanted that I knew I couldn't deviate from. They gave me these particular references and said, this is the Aether visual concept. So I knew whatever I painted had to look something like one of these things here. So it's kind of like this like iridescent kind of vapor. So the guy's sword has like this iridescent vapor because that's the technology they wanted me to put in. That's something that you got to like, if the client's giving you references, you got to respect the references they give you, even if you don't think they're good. Even if you don't think they're good, you kind of got to use them, right? It's not really it's not always a conversation of like, hey, do you think this is good? Sometimes it's more of like, hey, I need you to paint this, and then like you just need to paint it. Most larger clients, they want to see your input, because otherwise, why would they hire you? Like most larger clients really want your input. Some of the smaller clients are just unsure. They don't know what's good or bad. So it's also good to maybe have a talk where you're like, hey, I was thinking about what you said. What if we did this? And you could pitch ideas, but you should always respect the references that are given. And if you do something like, If you draw something that looks nothing like any of the references that were given, then you're in trouble, because then the client's like, it doesn't look anything like what I said I wanted. Um, that's just, you don't want to be in that position. Power of choice, create multiple sketches to show range. This is a pretty good example here of these drawings. There's like 4 drawings of a guy. Each one's pretty different, but it's generally like the same guy options. What you don't want to do is like, you don't want to just draw one piece of art and give it to your client. You don't just want to be like, here it is. You normally want to draw like at least 3 options, minimum 3 options. You want to show some vague ideas of like where you could go with it. As an art director, it's very frustrating to get an artist who just sends me like one image and like, hey, this is it, and I'm like, well, it's not really it, because we need to like figure out what it's going to be still. So I need to see more options. So I've had to tell people in the past, you need to send me like 5 more options, like, because like I need to see more ideas here. This is an exploration, So selection process, educate the client that they're responsible for selecting the sketch and finalization. So part of that back and forth, though, when you do send multiple options, is you need to make, like I said, pick whichever your favorite is and we'll move forward with that. And then you got to note what they said and keep that in mind later. That'll prevent scope creep. Scope creep is the term that I was looking for, actually. Scope creep. You never want scope creep. If it's your first time working, you need to realize that directions on how to move forward will generally come from the client. So this is another note. If this is your first time working ever, and you do a bunch of drawings, and then you tell the client, hey, I really like this one, I'm going to work on that guy. Like, that's not how it's going to work. Like, your client's going to tell you what you're going to work on next. Just keep that in mind. Some artists that start out, they just kind of do their own thing, and they're not used to having to work with somebody. And when someone hires you, they're expecting you as the artist to listen to them. That's how it works, right? Sometimes they're hiring you because you're like an expert and they want to see your opinion. You got to kind of gauge what your situation you're in. Typically, if you're like a seasoned artist with a bunch of years of experience, they're hiring you for your expertise. If you're like a new artist and the client has a very low budget, it's kind of obvious. They're kind of like, you're all they could afford. So they want something very specific. I find it like clients with less money want something really specific. Clients with more money want more options and exploration. They don't really know what they want yet, but they're trusting you to find it. That's how I found it in my past. So just keep that in mind. Last section, extras. All these little things I'm about to say, I could do a whole talk about each of these. I'm just going to go through them real quick. Track everything. Track all your expenses for tax season. Save your receipts. Save your catalog. Save receipts for supplies, books, apps, subscriptions, games, film tickets, food during meetings, workshops, classes. Anything that's related to you working as a professional, you should save receipts for your tax purposes. You have to do that. It's just, especially if you're freelance. That's just a big save everything. Track it all. If you're out with a client and you're like meeting in a cafe and the barista's like, do you want a receipt? You say, yes, I want that receipt. Because you want free coffee. Basically, all that stuff goes to, the meeting. It's a meeting. You talked about work during dinner. Dinner's on business. You're the business, though, so you're going to have to still pay for it. But you can get tax write-off later. Okay? If you're in the film industry, buying movies can be work-related. If you're in the video game industry, buying video games can be work-related. If you're in board game industry, buying board games is work-related, right? Because you're studying other parts of the industry, right? So just keep that in mind. Network. Meet people. Go to parties. Go to sketch night. Do life drawing. All the best gigs I've had in my life, all of the major gigs I've had in my life have come through networking. I didn't have not one of my big jobs that like sustains me as a career. Not one of them has come from just me applying to a company. I've never just applied to a company and just gotten a job that way. It's always been through networking. It's always been through people I meet. The highest paid freelance job I ever got was from Sketch-Night. I was going to Sketch-Night for a couple of years at that point, and one of the guys at Sketch-Night was like, "Hey, are you free to work on something? I need help." And I started working on the thing, and it paid me like $75 an hour, and it was just rendering characters. So it was basically just me cashing in money because I just painted for like hours. Um, that was like one of the best paid freelance jobs I ever got. And it was through Sketch-Night. Um, I got work to do What We Do in the Shadows, the TV series. I got that because a friend of ours was dating one of the producers in the show, so they knew I was an artist and they knew they needed artists. So I got to do What We Do in the Shadows artwork for the TV show through that connection. I landed my studio job, the job I've been at for 10 years now. I got because I went to a birthday party and I met my future boss at the birthday party and we talked, and I happened to have my portfolio with me at the time, and I've been working there for 10 years. Um, and then I found artists on Discord to work on my projects. So, as much as I've gotten jobs come to me, I've tried to give jobs to people. Um, I think some of y'all, if you're watching this later, you're watching this now, some of you may have worked with me already. There's certain times I get jobs, I can't take them, I can't do them myself, so I just need someone else to help, and I art direct the job instead. But I normally go to Dan Warren's Discord first, and I ask around. I go to Dave Raposa's Discord, ask around who's available. Um, I'll keep doing that with the different jobs I get, and it's just one of those things I try and do because the networking is how you get work, really. Okay, last point. Contact me if you want advice, if you want portfolio review. I mentor people for free if you're interested. My Discord is Mike086. That's Mike086, or you can email me, Miguel Coronado. No, sorry, not Miguel Coronado. It's Miguel at mciii.net. That's back here. It's on my website, Miguel at mciii.net. That's my email. If you have questions, if you need advice, or if you want a mentorship, if you're like a new artist and you're like, I need a mentor, I'll mentor you. It's free. Okay. That's it. That was the talk. So I'm gonna run through chat. I'm gonna scroll back up and just read through chat. If you have any questions at all, ask the questions in chat now. I'm gonna try and catch any questions that may have jumped into the chat earlier, but give me one moment to read through. Looks like how often do I prefer to have meetings? I try and meet at the beginning of the project. You definitely meet at major check-in points. You might want to meet. If it's like a new project, I think major check-in points are important to meet with a client. That's just something that I find. I think it's like the very beginning, major check-in points. Sometimes, if there's time, it's nice to have a wrap meeting where you talk about all the good things that happened and all the bad things that happened. That they call that a post-mortem. We do that at work all the time, like a post-mortem about this part of the project. It'd be like, oh, well, this was great, but this fell through the cracks, that was bad. And it's just one of those things that like it's good to have. Okay. Yeah, my dog likes to bark. So when I have my meetings, I work with a company in LA, so my meetings are always in the afternoon, right around end of day, at 5 o'clock here. So my dog is always barking at all the people coming home right when I'm taking my meetings, and it's really annoying, but it's just how it works. Some of these should be no-brainers, yes, Kyle, but I only listed them because I'd have to deal with it via me art directing. I've had to deal with artists that I've gotten frustrated with, and I'm like, oh my god, why can't they be more professional? Or I've been called out and people were like, Mike, you need to be more professional. So this whole talk comes from either me being more professional, or needing to be more professional, or someone else needing to be more professional. But yeah, that's just that. Okay. Current contract not the AI clause. Yeah, that's just a new thing. I mean, it's only been in the last few years. You have to really consider it now. You underquoted. Job scope was larger than promised. Definitely have no time for revisions. Mostly no. Yeah. You're gonna underquote at some point. I've underquoted plenty of times. It's just part of it. I think everyone underquotes at some point, and you're just like, fuck. You just got to finish it. You could always cancel the project, but typically it's like, I find it's always a thing where like, even that little bit of money you're getting is still more than nothing, so you don't want to cancel. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of depressing out there. Yeah, Americans, make yourself LLC. You can make yourself LLC, or I think it's like a C corporation. Don't quote me on that. It's LLC, or you can make yourself a corporation, and basically you're protected legally if something happens. Let's say your company fucks up this project, like, and someone else wants to sue you. They can only sue the company they were in business with, which is like the LLC or the corporation, and you are basically separated from that. You're like, no, that's just my company. It's not me. And so if they sue you and they charge you a bunch of money, they'll sue the company's money, not your personal money. If you're a sole proprietor and someone sues you, you have to pay out of your pocket. But if you have a company set up, the company has its own bank account, and it's different because you pay yourself out of the company bank account. That's how it works. All right. I'm glad everyone liked it. I'm going to basically stop the stream, and I'm going to cut off the first part of this video stream because I was just like chatting with nobody, and I'm going to upload the video as a fresh upload basically right after this. But if anyone had any other questions, I'll give it like one more minute, see what they say, and then I got to do freelance. But hopefully this helps. I know a lot of this stuff is real basic, and like I said at the beginning, this is for people just starting out. This is for people who maybe just got the job for the first time, and it's all the stuff I had to learn on the job, and nobody told me. Like I said, I didn't know what a deliverable was. I didn't know what an agenda point was. I didn't know what scope creep was. Like all these things, I just didn't know what that was at all. And there's a bunch of more technical stuff that you will learn in like the video game industry specifically, like a vertical slice. If you don't know what a vertical slice is, you probably haven't worked in games yet. Vertical slice is basically like a chunk of the game that functions on its own. And so like you might be hired to work on a vertical slice, and if the vertical slice is really good, then the game will be published, and then the full game will be made, and they'll hire a bunch of people to make the game. That's typically how it works with a video game company. I didn't know what that was when I first joined the company. Like, we're doing a vertical slice, and I was like, I don't even know what a vertical slice is. And I was like, I have no clue what that is. And one thing I think the last thing I want to leave y'all with is that I've worked with a bunch of big companies in my time in the industry. A lot of the companies I worked with them through my company, like the studio. I worked with them through the studio, and you'll find like down here, like Disney, Skybound. Some of these companies aren't as efficient as you think they are. Some of these companies like don't communicate really well with each other, and you don't know that until you work with them, and you think you're working with a big powerful company that's really cool, and they're not as efficient as like your smaller company is. And it could be eye-opening, like how unprofessional certain companies can be and how professional you know could still be, right? So how do I approach a client with bad news? How do I approach a client and renegotiate? I think for me, if I needed to renegotiate, I would probably have like an email saying like, "Hey, based on the last request, I'm afraid we're venturing into some scope creep, and I think we need to have a meeting and discuss additional resources for this project. Resources being money, right? Or you could say we need to increase the budget of this project because there's a scope creep happening, and we didn't really sign on for that with our contract. I say are we. When you work at a company, you say are and we a lot. You don't just say I. Like we want this, we like that. It's kind of like your collective, which you are a collective, but you can be a freelancer by yourself working at home, and you could still say are and we to make yourself sound like you're more established. You could say like, my finance department will get back to you. Your finance department could just be you, but you could just say my finance department will get back to you, and it could just be your different email, like finance at miguelcoronado.com sends the email, and that's the finance department, right? You can do that kind of stuff, and you'll sound more professional, more established. But I would say I would start with the email. Probably you want to get it in writing. You want to get it in writing that like this thing is happening. You're afraid it's a little bit of scope creep going on. You might not want to say scope creep. You might just say like, based on the last revisions we've had, I feel like we're now kind of going beyond the agreed to terms of our contract. I think we need to renegotiate some of the budget for this part of the project. You kind of just word it that way. You always want to make it sound like there's ways to fix it. Like look, we can do this. We just need to renegotiate. Like, it's fine. You got to kind of talk it that way. If you have bad news, bad news is, I guess it would depend on the bad news. I mean, like, I don't know how bad the news could be, right? So, like, it's all relative. Like, if like you were supposed to find a file and then you realize you deleted all your files and you don't have that file anymore, that'd be really bad. Like, if I was at work and they asked me for like a work file and I was like, oh, it's the main character concept design, and like I couldn't find the file, like then that would be like, well, Mike, why can't you find your work? How would I deliver that news? I would probably be like, you gotta be honest. You just gotta be like, hey guys, I've been looking everywhere for this file. I'm afraid it might have gotten lost in the cracks. I don't know if I deleted it or if something didn't sync right, but I cannot find that file right now, and I just need to let you know immediately that we need to. And then give some options, like I will redo the file for you. That might be you might have to eat the cost. I'll redo it for you. Or I need to recover my hard drive, like, because it got corrupted or something, we can try and recover it that way. Like, there's a different, you got to get, one thing when you're delivering bad news, you don't want to just not deliver solutions. You don't want to just be like, oh, I deleted the file, we don't have it anymore. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't help me. Like, you told me that you deleted the file, so now we don't have the file. So now what? What's the solution here? Like, the people just want to hear the solution. So when you're delivering bad news, you should be prepared with some options as to what you're going to do to remedy the bad news, whatever that is. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're not going to be able to remedy it, and it's just a situation where you're like, oh, this thing happened, and like I lost all my work, and I didn't foresee it happening, and there's no way I can get this delivered to you tomorrow. Like, let's say you're working on your file, and there's like a storm surge, and your hard drive gets fried, and the thing's due tomorrow, and it was a rush job, so you only had a day to do it, and it's just gone. I mean, like, in that case, it's like, what can you do? You can't do the work. You can't just make up that time. If it's due tomorrow, you'd have to ask for an extension or something. You have to be like, look, if you give me an extra day, I could like find a new computer and just do it that way an extra day or something. Like, you'd have to like come up with some solutions for it. But that's how I would, any kind of bad news, approach with solutions. That's to sum it up. Um, yeah, needing to renegotiate, just state the facts. Be honest. Be upfront and honest about it. Like, oh man, those changes sound awesome. But honestly, I feel like we're breaching the scope of the project a little bit. So if you really want me to do those extra 5 characters, we're going to need to renegotiate the terms of the contract. Are you okay with that? Do you want to have a meeting set up? We could talk about that. You gotta be calm when these hiccups come in the job. You can't just freak out or like lose your shit. You can't assume the worst. Like, it just happened to me recently. We asked for changes on a project, and the artist came back to me with like, "Hey, are you serious?" And it's like, "Yeah, of course I'm serious. Like I asked for the changes. I'm very serious. Like if you feel like you're not getting treated fairly, just say so. Just say like, hey, these changes feel like they're outside of the project scope. I feel like we didn't account for that when I budgeted for the project." And then they'll say, "Oh, okay. Well, how much do you feel you need?" And then you could be like, "Well, I have an extra $300," and they'd be like, "All right, well, we can do that." Like you don't know. You don't know until you ask. But don't assume the worst. Like normally things can work out. Normally, um, but yeah, I think that's the big thing. It's just you got to be pleasant. Um, Even if things are sucking, you got to kind of be pleasant. Because it's like a Uber driver. Like someone talks about how do I think it was who was it? Hi, I'm Sleepy. You're like, how am I gonna start being an Uber driver because the industry sucks right now? When you're an Uber driver, you want a good review. You know, even if the guy in your car is like fucking annoying as hell, you want them to review you well because you want to do more rides with people. It's the same with freelance. You want people to go, "I loved working with Gross Girl. She is like the best partner to work with on a project." Even if that client was the most fucking annoying person in the world, you don't want them to you don't want them to know that you thought that. You gotta just make it as pleasant as possible for them, because you want them to go around and talk to other people about how you're the person to go to when they want some real work done. And that's how you got to think about it. Like the word of mouth is a big deal. Um, it's just a big deal, and um, you try to be accommodating. Um, it's just like a service industry, right? But yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna jump off. Thanks for joining. Hope this helps people. I'm going to cut the first chunk of the video off and upload it. So this stream version will be on if anyone finds it, but I'll do an official like video drop that'll just be on my channel. If you have any questions, something comes up later. Again, you have my email, you have my Discord, Mike086 Discord. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye bye. Have a great Thursday. And yeah, good night.